Even before AI, there was the cloud transformation, right? Yeah, we saw that happening. So we said, okay, the gaps will be just like massive, right? And it will just like, it will be a matter of time until everyone understands that. And by the way, the hackers will leverage that. Like in security, there's a lot of problems, right? But at the end of the day, for every era of like security, there will be focused on like few vectors of like attack, right? Like yes, there will be like 20% that are like all over the place, but 80% will be focused on something specific. And actually, this is the statistic that we're seeing today of the attacks. More than 80% of the attacks are identity based, just like someone found
Yep.
the credential and just getting in through the door and stealing data.
As we record this, right, we are going through a period of time when AI is on everyone's tongues, and it means something completely different than a few years ago. But let's be honest, there's a lot of people thinking about, call it digital staff, call it replacing human units of work, call it whatever you want. They're calling about agentic proactive behavior on behalf of humans. Is that what you were looking at when you founded Oasis Security, or did you kind of serendipitously fall into the right time? Tell me a little bit about that.
I have to say, like security from one end, like security innovation is kind of like it's it's easier. Why? Because security always comes last, right? First of all comes innovation in technology, then the infrastructure changes, and then we realize we have a lot of security gaps, right?
Yep.
So basically, when we saw the problem, we saw the change in the infrastructure. We saw that like the change of like even before AI, there was the cloud transformation, right? Yeah, we saw that happening. So we said, okay, the gaps will be just like massive, right? And it will just like, it will be a matter of time until everyone understands that. And by the way, the hackers will leverage that. Like in security, there's a lot of problems, right? But at the end of the day, for every era of like security, there will be focused on like few vectors of like attack, right? Like yes, there will be like 20% that are like all over the place, but 80% will be focused on something specific. And actually, this is the statistic that we're seeing today of the attacks. More than 80% of the attacks are identity based, just like someone found
Yep.
the credential and just getting in through the door and stealing data.
I'm going to ask you a question that I normally hate, but feels appropriate. I hate asking startup founders this, and I'm about to do it to you. Um, Access management, identity, right? There are major players, major infrastructure players that have been doing this across cloud and on-premise services and complicated networks for a very long time, the Microsofts of the world and many others. What is it about non-human identity management that requires an outsider, someone to come in and build a new solution to solve a new problem?
It's a circle of life of technology at the end of the day, right? A lot of the companies that came like through the years, if we're looking at the history, we're looking at something that is happening there, understand that like they need to be ahead of the curve, right? And when you're a startup, like when you're like, I would say smaller than a big enterprise, you can move faster, much faster,
Of course.
right? And there's like less limitations, less things to stop you from innovating, which allows you to be like ahead of the people that are coming after a problem, right? And by the way, in many cases what happens with innovation is like there's everything is moving so fast that like there's a big need for this to be coming in, right? So if like a big player like looking at that problem and saying like, well, I will shift and steer this ship to that solution, it will take it 18, 24, 36 months until they're getting to the resolution, while a startup, a nimble startup, a lean startup can solve it within a few months, right? And innovate through that. And the ability to understand this market. By the way, if you ask me like what will be the next for Oasis, I'll tell you, look, I have a prediction to that, but at the end of the day, the market will dictate, right? Like
That's a wise founder answer. Follow the customer in the market, basically. But it makes sense. But let me ask you. You're talking about a fast moving market, right? You're talking about being able to adapt and listen to customers. Do your customers understand the problem that you're trying to solve, and do they feel it? Do they feel that this is a problem now?
you know, when we started, I think that even our customers felt it even strongly than us. When we were presenting that, we were just like, okay, like take a look at that. It's like, but they were speaking from the point of pain,
Yeah.
not from the point of innovation. When you're speaking from the point of pain, it's a completely different mindset, right? I can understand the problem completely, all in, just like, the technological side of that, how to solve it. He understands that from the point of like, I need to solve it now. Like my job is on the line here. Like my people are on the line, right? I have to solve it, right? And this emotional attachment is much stronger in many ways. And this is why I said it is like the market should dictate.
So how would you describe that pain they're feeling? Because you're right, and I think this is actually a topic that comes up on the podcast constantly, but it's because it's important, right? Like innovation almost always derives from pain, real or perceived, present or future, right? And it gets really hard when people don't understand that pain. So who is feeling the pain, and what is it? Are they just pulling their hair out trying to manage a wildly multiplying set of identities, or is there something more fundamental?
I think the best word that I'm hearing across is a paralysis mode right now. And when they're
Yeah.
seeing the problem, they're seeing how it's expanding. They don't have a clue of like how to start address it at scale.
Yeah.
And this is like kind of like a painful but a beautiful moment in innovation. That like customers like, well, they see the risk, they see other organization being breached of that, they see the scale of the problem, they're seeing themselves breached with that, and they're seeing that they're like chasing fire right now. And the sad thing, and maybe it's also the happy thing, is like nobody will admit that he has a problem if he doesn't have a solution.
It's philosophical,
But
but
it's
is it
true.
true?
But it's true, right?
Yeah.
It's true. You will do everything around that
Yeah.
to do that, right? So like not to admit that you have a problem. And by the way, it's like natural to have this feeling, right?
There's a classic framework to thinking about innovation, or at least it's one that I fall back on a lot, right? Which is that you require a few ingredients and you require some pain, some visceral pain that a human feels, right? But you also require possibility, something about the art of the possible that makes you believe that there's a better way. And I think that's what you're getting at. And in that gap lies this trap of serious dissatisfaction, right? Because when you know that there is a solution out there, that you might act. And so, how is that conversation going in your industry? Are people just starting to realize that, oh, this is a pain that where I have to get out of paralysis mode? Are best practices getting written?
In a regular pitch deck, right? There's like, first of all, let's set up like the problem statement, and then let's speak
Sure.
about a solution, right? In most of my conversations, like it's just like, yeah. Can you stop with the problem statement? We understand it completely. How can you solve it, right? People want to solve the problem. They want to understand what is the vision and philosophy of doing that, right? And they understand the scale. They want to make sure that you understand them as well, right? You understand like when you're addressing this problem, you are addressing it in a way that is actually meeting our business needs. By the way, like every product, every solution needs to have two things. It needs to have technological differentiation, right? But it needs to have also philosophical differentiation. Like, what is the philosophy that you're driving here, right? And I'm like, we're driving those two together because from technological perspective, yes, we can discuss about it. Like, what is the differentiation? What have we built? Where is the IP, right? But when it comes to philosophical, and this is something that we understood pretty quickly, organization, because of the Gen Z infrastructure, right? We cannot be forcing developers or like infrastructure to use something different, or like don't use the on premises, don't use this cloud provider. No, the opposite. We need to support it. We need to hug it. We need to make sure that like security is coming in their mind when they're acting in a simple way. And security at the end of the day, it's not a single product, right? It's a mindset.
Yep.
And we need to make
Structures,
sure.
philosophy, it's a lot. But that's such a beautiful framing, a philosophical differentiation, right? Versus, a positioning statement or a competitive slide in a pitch deck or whatever else. And so you're really grounding, if I understand it correctly, you're really grounding in this philosophical perspective and kind of a principle that change in development infrastructure, IT infrastructure, employment relationships is coming. Use the Gen Z phrase, but people are working from different locations. They're pulling in new tools, and there's a new tool available every day, right? And the security apparatus and the security system has to be able to adapt to that. Did I get that about right?
100%, 100%. And it's also, as always, just like creating those bridges between what security is trying to protect to how the organization is being operating and creating value, right? In general, it's like the best analogy that I heard is that security is like a seatbelt, right? Like without a seatbelt, you'll be scared to drive like more than 10 miles per hour, right? With a seatbelt, you can drive faster.
Yeah.
And when innovation comes from the organization itself, like, um, cloud adoption, AI adoption, you want to make sure you're doing it right, by the way. So, and in that case, specifically non-human identities are like one of the two factors that we need to, or three factors that we need to keep our eyes on when it comes to this like new Gen Z era of infrastructure.